In this video, we will show you how to replace your driver's side rear window regulator and motor assembly on this Ford F-150. This will be mounted inside of your rear door. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. To be able to gain access to this, we're going to have to remove the inside door panel. To remove the inside door panel, we're going to make our way just underneath the inside grab handle. You're going to find a plastic trim panel here. It's kind of like a small trap door. We'll go ahead and pop this free using a small pocket screwdriver or small prying device. Now we'll be using this tool directly inside of the groove right along here. There's actually a couple locking tabs that make their way along the top. So as we make our way in along the side, we're just going to try to make our way up along the top as well. After that, you should be able to start pulling this out and away. You can use a plastic trim tool if necessary. Now we can see those two locking tabs. We have the lower ears down along the bottom. In behind that area is where our next mounting bolts are. For each of these two mounting bolts, we'll be using a 7mm. Inspect your mounting hardware as you continue, replace as necessary. Let's get the next one. Let's move just above that area to the inside grab handle. We're going to remove the outer trim plastic panel here. Now for this, you want to start with what would be the forward side of this. We'll gently start prying it out. It does have several locking tabs, but over here there's an ear that makes its way in and behind the panel. So you need to start from this end. Now for this, you can use a plastic trim tool. I'm going to start with a small pocket screwdriver. We'll gently make our way in between this area, being careful not to cause any damage, and gently start prying it away. At that point, you can continue on with that plastic trim tool so we don't cause any damage here. We just want to carefully start pulling it out. Okay. There we are. Let's have a look along the back side there. You can see our locking tabs. And there's that small ear that I told you about that goes behind this area. With the panel out of the way, we have access to our next two mounting bolts. You can see both of them right here. We'll be using a 7mm. Now let's continue on towards our window switch. We're still using that small pocket screwdriver. To dislodge the window switch, you want to carefully pry along each side of that window switch. Right along here and right along there. There's two locking tabs. Now once you have that lifted up, we'll be paying attention to that wiring harness. As far as the wiring harness is concerned, you want to go ahead and press in on this locking tab, and then you can disconnect it. A quick inspection on both ends for corrosion. We'll set that window switch aside. Now let's make our way all the way down to the bottom of the door panel here. You're going to find two more 7mm headed mounting bolts to remove. As you can tell, these are considerably shorter than the others. Now we'll start separating the door panel from the door using a plastic trim tool. You don't want to try using a screwdriver, you could cause damage to your paint. We'll just carefully make our way in between and gently start prying this away. As you make your way up to the top, you want to pay attention to your door lock knob. We'll carefully start lifting the door panel up and away from that. Pay attention to that window channel just in case it catches. Let's have a look along the back side. Now when I pulled my door panel away, this cable actually came loose on its own, but sometimes it doesn't. If that's the case, just go ahead and use a small pocket screwdriver. You want to try to find an area in between the cable and the inside door handle and gently just start prying it away. Typically it will slide out of the groove along this area here, then you should be able to pull it down and out. A quick inspection of that cable, and we'll set our panel aside. Now with the door panel out of the way, let's start removing our door speaker. Down along the bottom, you're going to find an electrical connector. To disconnect this, you'll find it has a locking tab directly in the center. You could press it in with your finger, or you could use a small prying device. I just have a small screwdriver. We'll press that in and disconnect that electrical connector. A quick inspection for corrosion. We'll set that wiring aside. Continuing on, you're going to find that you have three 7mm mounting bolts. They essentially form a triangle. There's one on this corner here down on the bottom, another one up on top, and there's a third one just over here directly across from that first one down here. We'll just use a plastic trim tool to gently separate the speaker from the door. Should want to pull away. A quick inspection of the speaker, and we'll set this aside. Moving along, we're going to make our way to our vapor barrier here. Typically, you can grab hold of one corner and start pulling it away. Just have a quick look. You can see right through the vapor barrier, and this is the adhesive making its way all the way around. It's butyl tape. It's extremely sticky and it will ruin your clothes. We'll go ahead and start carefully pulling this away. I'm just going to use a plastic trim tool here. You can use pretty much anything to start pulling it away. We'll be careful not to rip it because you will be reusing this. Make our way down along the bottom here. A quick inspection of that and we'll set it aside. Continuing on, it's a good idea to clean down the glass surface on the inside and on the outside. Now let's reconnect our window switch. Press that in, listen for a click. At this point, you want to put the key in the on position because we're going to have to function the window down to a point that we can separate the window from the window regulator. Now we'll start bringing the window down so we can gain access in these larger areas. Now that we have the window and the window regulator down to a position that we can gain access to both of the adapters, you can see one in this large opening here, the other one's in the small speaker port. Before we start separating the window from the window regulator, make sure you have something to hold the window in the upright position. I'm going to use some masking tape. Now to start separating the window from the window regulator, we want to have a look at those adapters. What we're really looking for is along the back side here or the inboard side, there's a locking ear. We need to go ahead and carefully pry that locking ear away from the glass and gently start lifting the glass up and away from the adapter. It's not going to go very far until you have the other one done as well. Once we do have both of those broken free, we're going to carefully lift the window into the fully upright position. Now as I make my way in here with this, go ahead and have a peek deep inside this area. You're going to find that the glass has a circular port and you can see the locking tab. We're making our way in between the glass and that locking tab, gently prying it to separate it, and we'll slide the glass up as I mentioned. There we are. I have the glass separated on this side. Let's continue on doing the exact same thing on the other side of the window regulator. There we are. Now we can start lifting the glass to the fully upright position. Now we're going to start bringing this up. We'll make sure we have our painter's tape or masking tape handy. With this in the upright position, we can go ahead and tape this up. Now this can be a little bit easier if you have a helper holding the glass for you so it does not fall down while you continue on. Once you're sure your window is properly secured, we can continue on to removing the mounting hardware holding the window regulator in place. There's two pieces of hardware that are hidden. There's one piece right behind this portion of tape here, and there's a second one located right along this area. We can just remove that protective tape. Now in and behind that area, you're going to find a 10mm nut for each of these. Let's start removing both of those. Now that we have the upper mounting nuts off of there, as you make your way down towards the bottom, stop in the center. You're going to find a 10mm bolt that goes into the bracket where your window motor is located. Let's remove that. Continue making your way down to the final two mounting nuts. Now we do still have a wiring harness attached to this, so we'll be careful, but let's start with this side over here. For this, we're going to carefully take hold of the window regulator and start pushing it inward towards the center of the door, removing the studs from their mounting points. As for this portion of the window regulator, we're just going to rest it down in the bottom of the door. Now let's continue on to the next portion of the window regulator. This is the portion that will have the wiring harness leading to it. There's our wiring harness. We're going to disconnect this from the motor. It has a locking tab. I'm going to carefully press on that locking tab and disconnect this. Of course, a quick inspection for corrosion once it is disconnected. That wiring looks good. We'll set that aside. Continue on to removing the window regulator and motor assembly from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Okay, let's install this window regulator and motor into the door. We'll carefully compress it together so we can get it into position through the large port here. This may require a little bit of patience. Now that we have it inside the door, let's start with the area that's going to swing all the way towards this area. We'll have to align the studs of the window regulator with their corresponding ports on the door itself. Start bringing this up. The hardest part's going to be the upper stud mounting points here because you can't really see up inside here. We're just going to reach up inside, carefully wiggle it around until we can see the stud starting to protrude through. All right, I have that top stud going through. I'm going to make my way to the lower mounting stud now. While holding that in place, go ahead and start in the mounting hardware, but do not tighten anything yet. Just going to start the nut right on my 10mm socket. It's a little easier to reach in here that way. Next, we're going to go for our center bolt here. You may have to reach inside and maneuver things around as necessary. This one's pretty much lined up already. Now let's continue on to the other side of the window regulator. Start getting this in position. We're going to start with the top. That's the hardest portion. Just trying to find that stud. Get it aligned. Once that's in, it's time to make our way down to the bottom. You know what to do. Start on the hardware. Now let's tighten it down. Let's go ahead and cover each of these ports here. Now it's time to reconnect our window motor. We'll go ahead and get this in line, press it in, listen for a click. Got a click there, a little tug to make sure it's properly secured. Now that we have that connected, we're just going to pay attention to the extra slack we have in the wiring harness here. I don't typically like to have this just dangling around. I like to tie it up in some way. You can use a wire tie, you can use some electrical tape, whatever you might happen to have. Just try to take up that slack so it's not dangling. The next thing we'll do is put the key in the on position, and we're going to take the window switch and power the window regulator down so we can gain access to each one of our two adapters. Now, by getting the window regulator down to this point, we've clearly tested the regulator and we know for sure the window regulator and motor are functioning properly. So now let's pay attention to those adapters. As you remember, each one of them is going to have a locking tab. We're going to have to carefully bring the glass all the way down into each one of these adapters. But be careful when doing so. It's possible when bringing the glass down, it might not make its way into the channel where it's supposed to be, where the lock is. It could make its way onto the opposite side, so you want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage. Now continuing on, we're going to carefully lower the window, so remove anything you have holding it up. I'm using this masking tape here. We can just go ahead and start removing it. That last one off of there. Now we'll carefully start lowering the window down into the fully locked position. We'll do this nice and slow, it's not a race. Continuing on, we're paying attention in the area with each one of those two adapters. Before you start sliding it all the way down to the fully locked position, just go ahead and have a quick peek at both of these. It's extremely important that it's properly aligned before you start pressing the window down. Now at this point I've checked both sides and I've confirmed that everything's properly aligned. We'll continue on sliding this down. Be extremely careful for any pinch points. You don't want to be holding around here while you press the window down. All right, I heard an audible click from both of those tabs. I'm just going to reach behind this area and attempt to lift up on the window glass. It should not lift up. If it does, it's not properly locked in. Perfect. Now let's test the functionality of the window regulator with the glass installed. We're going to go down and then end with it in the fully upright position. Go ahead and disconnect your window switch again. We'll set this aside. It's time for the vapor barrier. Get this in position, press it on. Double check all the way around. We're continuing on to the door speaker. Go ahead and plug that in first, down along the bottom corner there. Just go ahead and align it. Press it in, listen for a click. A light tug to make sure it's properly secured. We'll get this in position in the door. With it in position in the door, we have our 3 7mm mounting screws. Go ahead and start them in. After all of them are started in, you can snug them up. Make sure that's secure. Let's prepare to install our door panel. When doing so, there's a couple things that we'll pay attention to. You're going to have a locating tab. It's a fairly large piece of plastic protruding from the door panel itself leading into the door. Once you have that aligned, the rest of your push clips making their way around the door panel should align as well, so we're going to be pressing those in. There's a couple things that we'll pay attention to other than that. You also have the area in the center where your inner door handle is. This is where the cable will sit. And then as we're getting this into position, we'll also have to pay attention to the door lock knob. Let's start bringing this into position. We'll start with that cable on the inside door handle. That's going to need to slide underneath this ear right here, and it's going to fit directly into this port. We're going to press it in, listen for a click, make sure it's properly locked in. Press this in. There we are. Now let's get our window switch cable close to the port that it needs to be in. Now up along the top corner, we want to pay attention to that door lock knob. We'll push that into the port where it has to slide through the door panel. We can see that making its way down and through. We're going to pivot the door panel out on the bottom, but down along the top. Now we'll start swinging this down, confirming we're properly aligned, and start pressing it in. Now let's just double check, make sure it's seated all the way around. Now that we finished tapping that in and confirming it's properly seated, it's time to start installing the mounting hardware holding it in place. We'll start just underneath the grab handle. We had those 2 7mm mounting bolts that went in this area here. Go ahead and start them in and snug them up. They're both started. Let's snug them up now. Go ahead and protect that area with its cover. We have the 2 locking tabs up along the top, and down along the bottom you have the locating tabs. We'll go ahead and line this up, press it in. Roll it in from the bottom first, and then locking it in along the top. Listen for a click, double check, make sure that's secured. Let's move up to the grab handle now. We've got 2 7mm mounting bolts. You can go ahead and start those in and snug those up as well. Reinstall your protective cover in this area. When installing the protective cover, as you remember along the back side, you do have that 1 locating ear which will go behind this area of the door panel. Aside from that, you just have several locking tabs. Once you have everything slid behind and aligned, go ahead and drive it in. A couple light taps just to confirm everything's properly secured in place. After installing all that, we're going to make our way down along the bottom of the door panel. You have those 2 mounting bolts. I have them started in. We'll just go ahead and snug them up. Now it's time for the window switch. We have our wiring harness. Go ahead and line that up, press it in. Listen for a click from that, a light tug to make sure it's secured so it doesn't fall off while you're driving down the road. We'll go ahead and start pressing this down into position. Make sure you have it in the proper orientation, of course. Press it down. Listen for a click from both ends. Should not pull up and out of place. Now that we have the door panel installed, the next thing we'll do is test the functionality of the inside door handle. We did have to disconnect that cable from the backside. To test the functionality, I'm going to use a 1/4-inch driver here. You can also just use a 1/4-inch drive extension, and we're going to go right inside this door latch area, pretending this is a striker and the door is shut. I'm just going to go ahead and press this right in. Now continuing on from there, I'm going to try pulling this inward. Essentially like we're trying to open the door without actually pulling on the handle yet. Now while I'm holding pressure, I'll take hold of the inside door handle, pull on that, and this should release. As you can tell, it did release as it should. I'm just going to try that one more time. I'm putting pressure. We'll pull the handle. Perfect. Okay, friend, we finished our installation and we've tested the functionality. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.